If I begin anywhere honest, I have to begin in the little yellow house where I grew up, with the hallway mirror that always made me look longer and stranger than I felt. It stood between the coat closet and the kitchen, and when I was very small I used to pause in front of it whenever I passed, not because I thought I looked good, but because I thought I looked unfinished. I did not have that word then, of course. Back then I only knew there was a faint discomfort in being seen, and an even sharper discomfort in seeing myself, as if everyone else had been handed instructions, and I had somehow misplaced mine. My mother used to think I was simply dreamy. She would call my name from the stove, ask me to set the table or carry napkins or tell my younger sister to wash her hands, and I would blink as though I had just returned from some very distant place. Maybe I had. Even as a child, my mind was full of watching. I watched how my mother pinned her hair up before cleaning and let it down again before guests arrived. I watched how my aunt would tilt her chin when she laughed, how my grandmother dabbed perfume onto the inside of her wrists as if she were reminding herself she still belonged to the world. I watched my father knot his tie in the mirror every Sunday and then leave the room without ever looking back at himself again, as if being a man was something as ordinary and unquestioned as buttoning a cuff. He never lingered. He never wondered. At least not where I could see. I was the oldest of three, with a sister 2 years younger than me and a little brother who arrived when I was 9 and seemed from birth to belong to himself in a way that made me both protective and quietly jealous. My sister, Lily, moved through childhood with a kind of untidy confidence I mistook for magic. She was forever losing hair clips, staining tights with grass, talking too loudly in church, and yet none of it seemed to threaten her in the eyes of other people. She was still understood. She was still read correctly. Nobody looked at her and hesitated. Nobody called her shy when she was actually frightened, or serious when she was simply trying to listen to herself. I loved her and envied her with the uncomplicated cruelty only siblings can manage. We shared a room until I was 11, and sometimes at night, after she fell asleep, I would lie awake staring at the pale shapes of our dresses hanging on her side of the room and my shirts on mine, though even then I thought of them as belonging to categories more than to us. Her side looked like possibility. Mine looked like a decision I had never made. When relatives came over, the house filled with definitions. Boys outside helping carry chairs. Girls in the kitchen drying plates. Men discussing work. Women comparing recipes, schools, doctor's visits, the latest family offense. No one ever announced these arrangements. They rose out of the air as if they had always been there. I learned very early that what hurt me most was not being ordered where to stand, but feeling that everyone else arrived there naturally. At family weddings, my cousins would run between tables, the girls in smooth little shoes and bright cardigans, the boys already imitating the heavy impatience of their fathers, and I moved among them with a smile that cost me effort. There are photographs from those years where I look perfectly ordinary, a slight child in a neat blazer, hand on my grandmother's shoulder, but when I look at them now I can remember the exhaustion of holding myself into place. People love photographs because they freeze a moment. What they forget is that a frozen face can conceal a life spent bracing. My mother was the first person who noticed that clothing mattered to me, though she misunderstood why. She thought I was picky, sensitive to texture, hard to please. If a sweater itched, I could hardly think. If a collar sat wrong against my neck, I tugged it until she snapped at me to stop fidgeting. She would sigh in department stores and say, "You care more than your father does," half amused and half exasperated, while my father, trailing behind us with shopping bags, would grin and say, "That's because your mother taught him standards." Everybody treated it like a harmless little trait. Nobody knew there were evenings when the wrong outfit could fill me with such low, private despair that I had to lock myself in the bathroom and breathe through it. It was not vanity. I never wanted to be admired. I wanted to disappear into something that made sense. Some of my earliest clear memories are not of important days, but of ordinary ones. My mother sitting cross-legged on her bed, sorting laundry into piles, sunlight on the quilt. My grandmother folding scarves with reverence, as if cloth could hold memory. My sister asking me to zip the back of a costume before a school play, then running off without noticing that my hands had paused at the feel of the fabric. I remember one rainy afternoon when I was maybe 7, the power went out, and my mother lit candles in the living room because she thought it would make the storm feel less frightening. Lily got into our parents' room and came back wearing one of our mother's old shawls over her pajamas, declaring herself a queen. Everyone laughed. I laughed too, because that is what you do when something in you is too tender to touch directly. Then she tossed the shawl at me and said, "You be the queen's sister." My father chuckled from the sofa and said, "No, let him be the guard." It was the mildest comment, nothing more than a reflex and probably forgotten by everyone else before the lights even came back. But I remember the exact feeling of the cloth in my hands as I handed it back. I remember the hot little shame and the bigger ache beneath it, the one that had no name and nowhere to go. It was not that I wanted to play queen. It was that I wanted the world not to correct me so quickly. Children are expected to absorb themselves gradually like rain into soil, but I think I resisted. I lived beside myself. At school, I copied what the other boys did with the careful attention of a foreign student learning a language late. I laughed when they laughed, shrugged when they shrugged, performed boredom, roughness, indifference. None of it came naturally enough to be invisible. Teachers called me polite. Other parents called me sweet. My father, when he was trying to be affectionate, called me old-fashioned. But children can smell the effort underneath gentleness. They know when someone is translating themselves in real time. I was not bullied in any dramatic, obvious way. Not in the way movies like to tell it, with locker shoves and spectacular cruelty. What I knew instead was the thousand-paper-cut loneliness of never fully relaxing. The boys liked sports in a way that seemed tribal, ecstatic, physical. I liked the parts before and after. Lacing shoes, the talk in the car, the relief of taking off a uniform. The girls often included me when activities turned toward talking, decorating, planning, imagining, but only provisionally. I was welcome until I wasn't, close enough to glimpse a softness I recognized, not close enough to belong inside it. My mother tried, though I did not always give her credit then. She was a practical woman who believed feelings should be respected, but not obeyed too much. If I came home quiet, she would ask once what was wrong. If I said nothing, she would not force it. Instead, she would cut fruit, or set a mug of cocoa by my elbow, or send me with her on an errand. Love in our house was often expressed sideways. My father loved us too, but in a tidier, more conditional language, keeping the car running, paying bills on time, teaching me how to use tools, reminding me that the world was not always kind and that I would need resilience. He respected competence the way some people respect prayer. If something could be fixed, he considered it nearly fixed already. Emotional confusion, by contrast, offended his sense of order. When I cried easily as a child, he would grow embarrassed on my behalf. "Come on, toughen up," he'd say, not harshly, sometimes even with a smile, as if resilience were a coat I had forgotten to put on. I used to think he disliked something in me. Years later, I understood. He was frightened of anything that did not fit inside the life he knew how to survive. Puberty arrived like a rumor first, then a sentence. It was not only the changes themselves that unsettled me, but the way adults narrated them with such breezy certainty. Boys become this. Girls become that. It's awkward for everyone. You'll grow into it. That phrase followed me everywhere. Grow into it. As if identity were a suit hemmed slightly too long, as if all I had to do was wait. But waiting only sharpened the wrongness. My body becoming more visible as male did not feel like entering myself. It felt like being moved farther from a door I had not yet found. I became more self-conscious, more inward. I took longer in the bathroom. I studied faces in magazines not because I wanted to desire them, the way everyone assumed, but because I wanted to understand why some expressions looked like home and others looked like armor. My sister was entering adolescence too, and although I would never have said I wanted her experience, I watched it with a painful kind of fascination. The rituals around her seemed filled with permission. She complained about them, of course. She hated being photographed in dresses for holidays, hated learning how to sit properly, hated the constant commentary from female relatives about hair and posture and shoes. But even her irritation told me something I could not stop thinking about. The rules imposed on her were addressed to her. However unfair, however narrow, they still recognized her as their subject. I felt, more and more, like I was living in clothes and expectations written for someone adjacent to me. Around that time, Daniel entered my life with such quiet ease that at first I failed to understand how important he would become. We met when we were 12 because our science teacher paired us for a presentation neither of us wanted to do. He had a way of looking directly at people without making them feel examined. He was neither the loudest nor the coolest boy in school, which may be why I trusted him almost immediately. He laughed with his whole face. He listened without interrupting. He never seemed to perform himself the way the others did. I remember the first afternoon I went to his house. His mother offered us sliced apples dusted with cinnamon, and his older sister wandered through the kitchen with wet nail polish, grumbling about homework, and the whole place felt somehow looser than mine, less staged by expectation. Daniel and I sat on the floor of his room pretending to work while actually talking about everything from teachers we disliked to what we thought adulthood would feel like. He said he wanted a life where he could breathe. I remember looking at him and thinking, with a force that made me almost dizzy, yes, that exactly, though I could not have explained why the word breathe felt so charged. Loving him did not happen like lightning. It happened like weather. A pressure building so gradually, I mistook it for the climate of my own life. At first I only knew that I felt more real around him. That when he texted me late at night to ask a stupid question or tell me something funny his sister had said, I answered too quickly and then held the phone to my chest afterward as if I had swallowed something warm. He was the first person whose opinion of me could brighten or darken an entire day without his knowing it. When he once told me, after a class presentation, "You always notice things nobody else notices," I carried that sentence for months. It meant more to me than any praise I had ever received because it felt like recognition of the secret labor of being me. Not understanding it, perhaps, but brushing its edge. Our friendship deepened in the kinds of small ways that don't look like destiny until much later. Bike rides that turned into long walks because one of us had a flat tire. Weekends sprawled on his bedroom carpet with music playing low while we argued over movies. The year his parents nearly divorced, and he slept on my floor 3 nights in a row because he didn't want to hear them fighting through the walls at home. The winter my father lost his job and became mean with worry, and Daniel sat next to me on the bus, without talking until I finally told him what was happening. We grew into each other's habits. My family began setting an extra place, without asking if he was coming. His mother started buying the cereal I liked. My sister teased me mercilessly and called him my shadow, and I would roll my eyes and tell her to shut up while hiding the panic that came with any joke drifting too near the truth. But even then the truth was layered. I loved him, yes, in the way people mean when they speak of longing, and also in another way I could not yet separate from my own questions about gender. I did not simply want him to see me. I wanted to know who I would be if he did. Sometimes when we were together with his sister and her friends, and the air changed in subtle ways, and conversation moved toward makeup or clothes or which teacher was nicest and which boy was intolerable, I felt a strange blend of comfort and sorrow. Daniel could drift in and out of those spaces carelessly. He was allowed to be a boy among girls, without that meaning anything. I, meanwhile, had to monitor every gesture, every softness in my voice, every interest that might mean too much to the people around me. There were nights I went home from his house and stood in front of the bathroom mirror, trying to understand why his casual existence felt more impossible to me than my own. The first time I wore something of my sister's on purpose, not in play, and not by accident, I was 14 and alone in the house for less than 20 minutes. She had left a cardigan draped over a dining chair, a simple pale gray thing with small pearl buttons, and I remember staring at it as if it had called my name. Even now I can summon the ordinary silence of the house, the hum of the refrigerator, the slight trembling in my hands. I put it on only for a minute, maybe less. There was nothing dramatic about it. No music swelling, no revelation. Just the sensation of exhaling into a shape that did not fight me. It was not perfect. It did not solve anything. In fact, it frightened me because it brought relief, and relief is dangerous when you have built a whole life around enduring the lack of it. I took it off the second I heard a car in the driveway, folded it too carefully, and spent the rest of the evening convinced everyone could tell. Nobody did. Or if they did, they said nothing. That became the pattern of those years. Tiny private experiments followed by long stretches of denial. Borrowing, returning, erasing traces. Not because I wanted to deceive anyone for pleasure, but because I did not know yet whether what I was protecting was truth or delusion. I had absorbed enough fear from the world to distrust anything that made me feel exposed and relieved at the same time. So I told myself stories. I was just curious. I was just sensitive. I was just weird about clothes. I was just unhappy because I was in love with my best friend and had nowhere to put it. But every explanation left something out. The thing underneath did not disappear. It waited. Family life made the waiting harder and more revealing. My father became more vigilant as I got older, as if adolescence had activated some ancient alarm in him. He corrected my posture. He told me to lower my voice when I became animated. He suggested I join clubs that would bring me out of myself, which usually meant more traditionally masculine activities. He never accused me of anything directly. That would almost have been easier. Instead, he pressed at the borders constantly, steering me toward a version of boyhood he thought would protect me. My mother saw the tension but rarely named it. Once, after an argument in which my father told me I needed to stop overthinking every little thing and just be a teenage boy for once, she came into my room carrying folded towels and sat on the end of my bed. She did not ask what he meant. She only said, "He worries because he doesn't understand you, and he doesn't understand because you don't let him." At the time, I thought she was taking his side. Now I think she was offering the only truth she had. The problem was that I did not understand myself either. How could I let anyone else in? Daniel remained the center of the life I could bear. He was there when I got my license and nearly took out a mailbox because I was so nervous. I was there when he failed algebra and pretended it didn't bother him. We learned the contours of each other's families, the silences around grief, the jokes that meant someone needed to be left alone. If love can begin as gratitude, mine began there. He made no demands for hardness. He never laughed when I cared too much. Once, during our last year of high school, I apologized for being a lot after I spent an hour ranting anxiously about the future, and he looked genuinely confused. "You're not a lot," he said. "You're just you." I went home and cried over that sentence in a way that would have embarrassed me if anyone had seen. Just you. People say such things casually when they have no idea they are handing someone a lifeline. From class together, and somehow the conversation turned personal. I confessed in fragments and euphemisms that I had always felt wrong in ways related to gender, that I didn't know what counted as enough to mean something, that I was afraid of inventing pain because I wanted an excuse for being different. She listened without interruption. Then she said, "You don't need to be certain before you are sincere." It was one of those sentences that seem at first too simple to help and then return to haunt you because they are true. I had been treating certainty as the price of self-exploration. What if sincerity was enough? So I let myself be sincere in private first. I tried different names in a journal and crossed them out. I wrote pages beginning with "I think" because writing, I am felt too exposed. I practiced seeing myself in the mirror not as a failed man, but as a person in motion. Some days that helped.
Some days it only made me cry.
I told Naomi more. She listened, then asked what pronouns felt least painful. Least painful was such an unexpectedly merciful standard that I laughed. We began there. She used different language for me in our room, gently, experimentally, and every time she did I felt both warmth and terror, as if a locked door in my chest had been opened a careful inch. Relief, I learned, can be as frightening as grief. Grief you expect. Relief makes you realize how long you have been hurting. Telling my sister came next. We met at a diner halfway between school and home because I could not bear to have the conversation in the house. My hands were wrapped around a cup of coffee I didn't drink. I talked too much at first, explaining everything badly, circling around words.
She let me.
When I finally managed to say that I thought I might not be her brother in the way everyone believed, she stared at me for a long moment and then, to my astonishment, laughed through tears, and said, "I know you're not asking me to congratulate myself, but I've been waiting so long for you to tell me something like this." Then she reached across the table and took my hand. "You have looked lonely for years," she said. I didn't know what the shape of it was. I just knew it was there. I cried right there in the diner, in front of two retirees and a waitress pretending not to look, and my sister held on. It remains one of the gentlest memories of my life. My mother was harder, not because she lacked love, but because her love was braided tightly with worry. When I told her, she listened without interrupting, then asked practical questions with a steadiness that nearly undid me. Was I safe? Had anyone pressured me? Did I need help? Did I want her to call me something different? There was a tenderness in the way she reached for the actionable, the tangible. But beneath it, I could feel her fear, not of me but for me, for the life she imagined would now become harder. At one point she said, quietly, "I wish the world were gentler. I think I always knew it wasn't being gentle with you, but I didn't know why." That sentence forgave more of my childhood than either of us understood in the moment. We sat at the kitchen table until the light faded. She cried only once, not because she had lost me, as she insisted, but because she hated imagining all the years I had spent alone with it. My father was the hardest. There is no use pretending otherwise. He did not shout. In some ways, I might almost have preferred shouting. What he gave me instead was a silence, so dense it changed the weather in every room. When he did speak, he spoke in the language of confusion disguised as reason. He said I was overcomplicating my life. He said people my age were encouraged to make identities out of feelings. He asked whether I was sure I wasn't just unhappy. The cruelest part was that I had asked myself all those same questions 1,000 times. I recognized his doubt, because I had lived inside it. We hurt each other clumsily in those months. I wanted from him a swift understanding he could not give. He wanted from me a certainty and simplicity I no longer possessed. Sometimes I still think of him standing in the yard after one terrible conversation, staring at the fence as if it contained an answer.
He was not a villain.
He was a man watching the map of parenthood dissolve in his hands, and instead of admitting he was lost, he insisted the terrain must be wrong. Through all of this, Daniel still didn't know. That fact sounds absurd now, given how central he had been to everything, but maybe it was inevitable. Some truths are hardest to tell precisely because they matter most. He noticed changes, of course. He asked once if I was trying out a different style. I said yes. He said it suited me. He noticed I sounded lighter sometimes and far away at others. He noticed I was both more myself and more cautious around him, though I doubt he could have named it that way. We were in our early 20s then, and life was beginning to scatter our generation in every direction. Jobs, graduate programs, partners, apartments, obligations. The old assumption that there would always be another lazy Saturday together no longer held. That gave every withheld truth a sharper edge. The first time I saw him after I had begun using a new name among a small circle of trusted people, I nearly canceled 3 times. I spent an hour dressing, changing, sitting on the bed, changing again. Not because the outfit itself mattered enormously, but because every choice felt like a sentence. This is how I am asking to be seen. This is how much truth I can survive at once. In the end, I wore something simple, soft, unmistakably more me than what he was used to, but not so different that it could only mean one thing. When he opened the cafe door and spotted me, his face lit with that familiar open warmth, and for one suspended second I felt 14 again, hopelessly in love and terrified. Then he hugged me, stepped back and said, "You look good. Different but good. Happier."
Happier.
The word startled me. Not prettier, not strange, not confusing.
Happier.
I carried it like a lantern through the whole afternoon.